All right, welcome back, mathematicians. Today we are talking about the Pythagorean theorem and its converse. All right, so here we have a picture of Pythagorean theorem, or I'm sorry, Sir Pythagoras, who came up with the Pythagorean theorem. So here is Sir Pythagoras. Look how happy he looks. And he found out something really cool about triangles. Let's see what he says. So the Pythagorean theorem states that in a right triangle, this part is very important, all right? In a right triangle, this only applies to right triangles. So in a right triangle, the sum of the squares of the lengths of the legs is equal to the square of the length of the hypotenuse. Wow, that's a lot of words. So in here, the important words are legs and hypotenuse, and we're going to go over what those are in just a second. But here is an equation that states the Pythagorean theorem. So this is what Sir Pythagoras came up with. He says if it is a right triangle, A and B are legs and C is the hypotenuse, then A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So remember, anytime we've got that little 2 up there, we call that our exponent. So A squared is the same as saying A times A. All right, remember, anytime we're squaring a number, we're multiplying it by itself. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared is the same as A times A plus B times B, which will give us C times C. All right, so A squared plus B squared equals C squared. That's what we need to know. Now let's talk about what it means when we are locating the legs and the hypotenuse in our triangle. All right, so quickly, here is the converse. All you need to know about the converse of the Pythagorean theorem is that if it's basically the opposite of what we just said. So if A squared plus B squared equals C squared, then the triangle is a right triangle. All right, so that's all you need to know when we're talking about the converse, that if this equation is correct, then that triangle is a right triangle. All right, now let's talk about the legs and the hypotenuse. So here is a right triangle. We know it's a right triangle because we have that little square that tells us that is a right angle. All right, so if you remember, a right angle is always 90 degrees, right? So that's our right angle. We know because they drew that little square for us. And so in a right triangle, we have 2 legs. So here I've got leg A and I've got leg B. So we have 2 legs and we have a hypotenuse. Now, whenever we're dealing with the Pythagorean theorem, the first thing we always want to do is locate that hypotenuse. The easiest way to locate the hypotenuse is to first locate your right angle, and your right angle will always be given to you. Okay, you will never have to draw this square. They'll always have it for you. So find your right angle, and then you want to draw an arrow that goes away from your right angle. That arrow will always point to your hypotenuse. Okay, your hypotenuse is also the longest side in your right triangle. Okay, so here's a right triangle. Here's our right angle. If I take that right angle and I draw an arrow pointing away from that right angle, that arrow will point to my hypotenuse. So here's our 3 sides. We have A, we have B, and we have C. C is always the hypotenuse. Okay, and if we go back to our equation, if I take this length A and I square it, or I multiply it by itself, plus side B, I square that or multiply that by itself, it will equal C, or my hypotenuse, squared. All right, so if I take that hypotenuse and multiply it by itself, I square it, it will equal A squared plus B squared. So again, what you need to know about Pythagorean theorem is first our equation, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And you need to know that your hypotenuse is always C. And to find the hypotenuse, I just take my right angle and I draw an arrow going away from my right angle, and that arrow will point to my hypotenuse.